So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with My Hero Academia, so let's start the series. Izuku hiccuped, squinting his eyes to see a clearer image of one of his best buddies. Come on, already, he said. Just open the portal back to my dimension already, he begged, a little teary-eyed and intoxicated. Everything that was to be done, is done. Every loose end, tied up, every goodbye, said. Before Izuku, the man with the black hair questioned nervously, Do you really have to go back? I mean, you've basically lived half your entire life in the elemental nations. Izuku was still drunk when he said, Damn it, Sasuke. We've been over this who knows how many times. He swayed. The war might have ended here, with peace secured for a long, long time, but there's no reason the same is true for my world. Unlike here, where monsters like you, Naruto, the Kages, and even a random S-ranked ninja could come from nothing to get their level of strength, back home, everything is decided by birth. There is no chakra to level the playing field. There are only those born with the power to become heroes and those who have to leave their fates to said heroes. So, what? Sasuke asked, pointing an accusing finger at Izuku, you want to go back to play God or something? If it is how you told me and you came here 8 years ago, with nothing to your name, not a family, not a quirk, not a life. He may have been good at hiding it, but it was beginning to show that he was just as inebriated as Izuku. To continue to live for my dream, idiot. Izuku screamed, getting so upset that he launched a fist while intoxicated. Boom! The hillside his fist had struck erupted into dust and sundered soil, yet he missed. Sasuke recovered and delivered his own blow, which Izuku stopped with his forearm. I always wanted to be a hero, he said. And though I might have become one here in the elemental nations, he said. You and I both know how unlikely it is for conflict to rise again. A full-fledged brawl broke out between the two. Your village alone has you, Naruto, Tsunade, Kakashi, and Guy. With such a lineup only someone truly suicidal would dare try anything against the Hidden Leaf, even if the Five Nations Alliance didn't exist. But in my world, no one so much as comes close to that kind of power and there are countless more people, cities, and countries. My world needs me, Izuku said as he collapsed on his back, shaking his body out of anger. Izuku complained, TCH, and Sasuke fell in tow next to him. If even half of what you've said about how quirkless people are treated is true, they don't deserve you. Izuku scoffed, TCH yourself and stop being such a clingy baby, and then a grin appeared on his face. You know I'm not going to leave forever, right? With your broken spacetime magic you can come visit me whenever you get bored. Yeah, was all Sasuke could say before he sat up and opened a tiny sake bottle. One last toast, he asked, giving Izuku a knowing glance as he uncorked the bottle. Izuku merely stared at Sasuke for a good second before giving in, letting out a sigh, and saying, okay, but this is the last time. Seriously, after which he took a shot with Sasuke and instantly felt regret. Gaiac. Was that straight ethanol? He fought the urge to fall asleep and choked as he spoke. Ha, HYK, Sasaki exclaimed with laughter as he saw Izuku struggle to resist the effects of the strongest booze he had ever seen. A portal appeared before him and Izuku as his Rinnegan glowed with strength. Unfortunately, Sasuke's near-delirious state gave rise to the thought of pushing his friend through the portal, and Izuku failed to see it due to their extreme drunkenness. Sasuke remarked, see you later. You friggin' nerd, as he kicked Izuku's butt into the portal. Before he knew it, he was sound asleep. Aizawa coldly remarked, "Those are real villains," while adjusting his goggles to fit his face. The appearance of what appeared to be dozens, if not hundreds, of villains had already caused his class's trip to the USJ to go awry before it had even started. It appeared as though the cloud that gave rise to the army of villains was saying, "Eraserhead and number 13. But where's All Might? The documents we stole from UA the other day said he'd also be here today." "So, it was you scum who were behind the mess with the UA barrier and the reporters," Aizawa said with a sigh. "He's not here," a villain with gray-blue hair who either didn't hear Aizawa or didn't bother to answer simultaneously. His severed hands covered much of his body, including his face. "After all the trouble we went through to make it with so many of our friends, you want to tell me he's not here? Heh, maybe a couple of dead kids will draw him in." Approximately 100 feet above the baddies, another portal materialized at that exact instant. One unconscious Izuku Midoriya was thrown off it and fell without defying gravity. He responded, "Go away, guy. We can race around the land of fire after breakfast." Despite landing with enough force to somewhat crack the ground beneath him, he was unharmed and the shock of the fall wasn't even enough to wake him up. "Just let me sleep 5 more minutes, damn it," he moaned as he snored and rolled over to lie on his other side. As he walked toward Izuku brandishing a serrated knife, one of the several grunt criminals storming the USJ spit out, "What is this? Some kind of joke?" He moved cautiously toward Izuku, but Izuku just kept snoring even after he had his knife just a hair's breadth from the comatose teen's neck. "TCH, just kill that joker and be done with it," remarked the villain with the hand theme who appeared to be in charge of the invasion. Aizawa was now sprinting wildly in the direction of the army of villains after having previously leaped the entire length of the stairs. However, he was powerless to stop the villain before Izuku pulled out his knife and clink. Izuku had moved in his sleep once more to avoid the high-pitched ring of metal hitting concrete, which vibrated throughout the USJ. Aizawa, the villain trying to murder him, and almost everyone watching his situation paused. A coincidence? Clink. 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 The villain who repeatedly failed to slice him appeared more like a dim-witted toddler playing whack-a-mole, but it seemed that there was more to the enigmatic third party who had appeared comatose as he evaded numerous attempts on his life. Izuku's unconscious evading attempts were unsuccessful for around 10 tries before the green-haired teenager jolted to consciousness. Give a clap. Rather than evading, the villain's blade became lodged between Izuku's shoes. Just then, Izuku awoke, still obviously drunk, and smiled at his would-be assassin, asking, "Are you even trying to kill me?" Izuku swung himself upright and gave the villain a gentle punch a dozen meters distant before he could react. Wow, it's like he didn't even try to dampen that hit with. Oh. Right, Izuku recalled after being returned to his native world. Even though he was still far from sober, it wasn't difficult for him to put things together so fast as he observed the sophisticated technology of his worlds and the strange appearance of many people, not to mention the blatantly obvious hero and villain costumes that no ninja from the elemental nations could ever imagine donning. Abruptly, a dark mist started to appear in front of him. "Who are you and what are you doing here, stranger?" it inquired as it blinked light-like yellow eyes. Izuku pretended to be considering his options in a fun manner before snorting and stating, "Maybe I'll tell you if you answer one of my questions first." "What is it?" the evil in the incorporeal world asked. Given that it had already done so for the class of trainee heroes and that the villains would benefit from holding off the green anomaly for any amount of time with All Might out of sight, it saw no reason not to comply. What are you supposed to be? A kind of fog or mist man, or are you one of those annoying teleporting types? With my quirk lets make create warp gates, the antagonist declared. Wow, you really just told me up front? Well, Izuku said with a sigh, I guess a deal's a deal, so, to answer your question, my name is Izuku Midoriya and I've returned to become a pro hero. A moment later, Izuku was swallowed up by a sea of darkness. I see, the warping villain said, his light-like eyes narrowing, I guess that just means I'll have to deal with you like I did all the others. In the moment when he had to choose whether or not to be struck by the villain's quirk, he felt it would be worth it to see what would happen. He could have avoided, in fact, he probably could have scattered the haze that threatened to engulf him. Back in the ninja world, Izuku was renowned for his quickness and ability to think critically. Others who knew him personally would therefore wager that there was more to his decision, which, of course, there was, even though it might have appeared to be arrogance to others who had only heard of his power. Izuku specifically wanted to learn more about the villain's quirk. He was curious as to what the fog of a man meant when he stated that he dealt with the others. He was not only anticipating the sensation of entering a portal, as that was one of the many skills he had yet to master for himself. He also has contingency after contingency planned for any possible scenario that could go wrong. In the event that the villain's quirk did more than just displace him, he could rely on his terrifying speed and reaction time. Furthermore, if he discovered that the Mist Man was transporting him to a dangerous location, such as the ocean floor, space, or inside a volcano, he might return him using the teleportation tag he had left on the location from which he had been forcibly removed. Luckily, or not, depending on how excited Izuku was, Izuku had only been transferred a dozen or so meters above what looked like a mock ocean. Izuku was genuinely caught by a tongue in midair and almost fished over to the solitary boat on the improvised sea while he was arguing with himself about how he was going to approach his fall. Izuku remarked, damn, that can't be pleasant, after being freed and finding himself in front of three very different people. The thought of the frog person who had saved him tasting the muck and crud his garments had accumulated since his last fall troubled him more than a bit. A diaper-wearing infant with purple balls sprouting from his head exclaimed, Azui, what are you doing? He could be one of them. Azui, the frog person, looked at Izuku questioningly and remarked, why would they teleport one of their own, now? The purple-gray-haired teenager wearing a menacing black mask replied, yeah, and haven't you noticed? This guy was the one who fell from the second portal. He didn't come from that Kurogiri guy. However, it begs the question of who he is and what he's doing here. Izuku said, pausing briefly until he had everyone's attention, well, since you're asking. My name is Izuku Midoriya and to be honest, I don't really know where I am right now. I mean, my closest guess would be somewhere in Japan, but who knows how off Sasuke's broken spacetime power could be, he replied. They were all standing aboard a boat that was so badly damaged by a wave of water that it started to sink before any of the others could add anything to the discussion. One of the dozens of villains in the sea remarked, ha ha ha, just offer yourselves to us now and we'll make your deaths painless, as their ranks proceeded to inflict further damage on the ship. As he began to remove the balls from his head and hurl them at the criminals, the diaper-wearing infant exclaimed, no. I can't die yet. I can't die a virgin. After roughly 50 balls were hurled, the infant began to bleed from his scalp, even though it just took a split second for the balls to regenerate. Hey, Not to ruin your crisis or anything, but what are you trying to achieve? Izuku responded. This might really be it, but I won't go out without fighting, Azui remarked as the boat started to capsize. A light flickered in the masked boy's eyes as he exclaimed, "Fuck. I won't be able to catch all of them with my quirk, but it's worth a shot." The diaper baby went into a crazed state and exclaimed, "I'll flood them with my quirk. They'll all get stuck together and won't be able to follow us when we inevitably find ourselves swimming out of here." As the ship trembled for the 7th time, Izuku halted and said, "So the balls on your head, you're a quirk. They stick to people." "You're goddamn right they do. They could stick several 100-pound robots to the ground for me during U.A's entrance exam, and will stick to everything but me." After a period of humming, Izuku said, "Interesting. Say, can you pass me one of those balls? I want to try something." As he virtually flung one of his purple balls at Izuku, the diaper baby shouted, "Your quirk. Whatever, just save us." To make sure he could actually handle the ball without it sticking to him, the green teenager caught the purple ball with a chakra-covered palm and threw it once into the air. "Shadow Shuriken, Ball's technique," he called after snickering as he tossed the ball idly over the capsized boat's railing and then swerved through a few hand signals. The single purple ball multiplied into tens of thousands, which then stretched out to strike almost every evil who was foolish enough to stay afloat. Water release, water vortex technique. Izuku called, waving his hands through another set of signs, and in a few seconds, the villains, the diaper baby's balls, and even the capsizing boat started to be drawn toward the enormous whirlpool that appeared in the middle of the virtual ocean. Izuku replied, "Welp, we better get out of here," to the stunned group of training heroes. He summoned the appearance of 2 water clones and performed a single tiger hand gesture. While the other 2 clones picked up the others and leaped from the boat before it sank, he specifically chose Azui to repay him for saving him from sinking. "Are you standing on water?" Azui said, gazing at him. "Well, right now my clones and I are walking on water. It probably wouldn't matter much if you got wet given what I can tell about your quirk and the wetsuit you have on, but I extended the courtesy to the other 2, so I might as well give you a lift while I'm at it." Azui said, "Or is it a water quirk? Maybe you're one of those rare people with 2 quirks, like Todoroki." "I thought your quirk let you duplicate things," she asked, putting a finger up to prod her own cheek. Izuku chuckled aloud at her implication. She paused her conversation to give him a strange look, and he returned the gaze, declaring, "I'm quirkless." The blue-gray-haired villain with the hand fetish heard Izuku coming and remarked, "So you're a jokester, are you?" Izuku himself didn't dare attempt to hide once he set foot on the earth. He let Azui down and his water clones followed by the other 2 trainee heroes, before vanishing into puddles. Before Izuku could respond, Kurogiri, the warping villain, seemed to say, "Shigaraki Tamura," to the blue-gray-haired villain. "One of the students managed to get past me." With his claws digging vitriol into his neck, Shigaraki questioned, "It's game over?" Shigaraki turned and asked Kurogiri, "Guess we should just quit while we're ahead, huh?" without even looking at Izuku or the others. "If UA sends dozens of pros at us we'll get crushed." Kurogiri said nothing, but Izuku saw Shigaraki start to change his stance. Before most others could respond, Shigaraki launched himself into a full-fledged gallop. "On second thought," he said, "we should hit All Might where it hurts while we still can." He aimed a hand at Azui and was nearly reaching him when a shiver ran down his spine. Death. Just as Izuku's evil smirk brightened, he stepped back. Even though the green-haired teenager had not moved, Shigaraki was convinced that he would have been gravely wounded or killed if he had approached. Whenever Shigaraki got the drop on the former world-class supervillain during one of their sparring sessions, he exuded the same vibe his teacher did. Nomu. Forget the crippled weakling. Kill the green-haired kid, said Shigaraki, before rushing toward Kurojirai. A huge, black, bird-headed beast was on Izuku at the same moment, slashing out with enough force to destroy a structure, but still. Thud. Izuku remarked, now this is a challenge Lee would appreciate, as the dust settled and it became evident that he had used his right hand to catch the superpowered punch. Izuku's hand had to be supercharged to the point that he could compete with the fifth Hokage to block the monster's assault, and he was genuinely amazed by the monster's physical strength, even though no one in the room would be aware of it due to their lack of chakra. Nomu screamed, "Scree!" before it delivered another blow, but Izuku sidestepped and retaliated with a megaton blow of his own. Thud. However, the bird-headed creature didn't even flinch before launching a barrage of blows, seemingly negating the force of his attack. Naturally, Izuku would duck or block as the monster failed to gain any strength, but the same could not be said for him, as he gradually increased the chakra he used in his counterattacks, only to have the same result. Izuku joked, more intrigued than annoyed that he was not making any progress in the battle. What is this guy? A living shock absorber or something? Shigaraki chuckled and said, I'm surprised you managed to figure out his quirk so quickly. You see, Nomu is the anti-symbol of peace. He was built to take down All Might, and with his shock absorption quirk he can take any damage the soon-to-be-dead number 1 pro can dish out. Izuku jokingly remarked, so what you're saying is, that blunt force won't cut it against this thing? I can work around that, as his already superhuman speed increased to burn through hand signs more quickly than anyone could keep up. Izuku yelled, Storm Release, Laser Circus, as Nomu's 4 appendages were cut in the span of a single light flash. The land was covered in wire-thick ditches that must have been excavated dozens of meters into the ground beyond the now shrieking monster. Shigaraki swore, what the hell kind of cheat is that? Isn't your quirk supposed to be a knockoff copy of All Might? Where the fuck did you pull lightning out of your ass from? At that very moment, the metal doors at the USJ's entrance flew off their hinges as a very irate blond man with dark hair said, everything is fine now, for. Whether they were fighting or not, everyone in the USJ turned to face All Might as he uttered his catchphrase, I am here. Izuku hummed to himself, as he saw All Might scream past every villain from the USJ's entrance to the plaza where he, Shigaraki, Kurojirai, and the fallen Nomu stood. That strength, that speed, that accuracy. Izuku shook his head in dismay, he's not as strong as I previously believed. When he saw All Might suddenly gaze at him in alarm, his eyes immediately grew sharp, but before he could even consider what could have caused such an expression, he felt a great force strike him. Poof! A piece of debris from the overturned boat rocketed out of the puff of smoke that Izuku created at almost the speed of sound. Before it blasted a hole into the capsized boat that eventually sank completely, the chunk of dented metal skipped on the water from the USJ's pseudo-sea a few times. Izuku's low whistle of gratitude belied his apparent admiration for Nomu's strength when he remarked, damn, that actually might have hurt if not for the good old substitution technique. Izuku was berating himself inwardly for something as foolish as stealing the eyes of an adversary he had not yet killed. He had become a little too arrogant and had forgotten that he would not be able to use most of his senses because he was the only one with chakra in the world. He would have been struck without even a basic chakra enhancement to support his defense if All Might hadn't raised his guard in caution due to his appearance. With an angry scowl, Shigaraki said, "Now you can teleport to Izuku." Izuku said, I can, but that's not exactly what I used to dodge." Shigaraki screamed, "TCH. How many quirks do you even have?" Izuku said dismissively, "If you want to know that, I'll cut the same deal with you that I did that Kurogiri fellow. Before I tell you how many quirks I have, you tell me why Black Birdie over there has new arms and legs." Izuku already had a few theories on how Nomu might have been able to regenerate his limbs, but it would be easier for him if someone could respond to his inquiries and spare him the trouble of figuring it out by trial and error. Not only that, but he was eager to enrage the villains by being honest with them about his quirks. As naive as Izuku had been seconds earlier, Shigaraki began, "Because, you idiot, my anti-symbol of peace was built to end All Might. I never said it only had one quirk. With its shock absorption, hyper-regeneration, and super strength, it will destroy All Might in a battle of attrition." "Ha ha ha," All Might yelled abruptly, "if that's all you have against me, I know just how to end this fight." He abruptly disappeared from view except for Izuku and Nomu, grabbed Nomu's waist, and executed a suplex that literally broke the earth. However, Kurogiri built an exit portal directly beneath All Might, perhaps waiting for the perfect opportunity to build a portal through the earth where Nomu would have been rushing. Crunch. Izuku heard what sounded like a rib or two shattering, in addition to the low boom of the shockwave when Nomu hit All Might. Gah! All Might released Nomu and let it begin drawing him into the vortex, coughing up a startling volume of blood. Yes. Now all Kurogiri has to do is close the portal at the right time and All Might will be cut in half. As a wave of ice swept through the ground to devour Nomu, Shigaraki's triumphant digressions came to an abrupt end as Izuku heard the slightly familiar shout, "Die." At the same moment, an exploding fist crashed into Kurogiri. Standing over a fallen Kurogiri, the blonde-haired personification of explosions and destruction yelled, "Now I double, no triple dare you to move, motherfucker. I swear, if I so much as feel a twitch, I'll blow you to kingdom fucking come." He was holding the warping villain by the metal protectors around its neck. When Nomu's grip loosened from being frozen over, All Might seized the opportunity to break free. In addition to All Might, the teenager with the red and white hair who created the ice that saved the pro, "It's over. We win." "Yeah, you should probably give up peacefully now that you're totally outnumbered, Shigaraki," Izuku replied. His gaze never left the blue-gray-haired villain's body, despite the fact that he appeared carefree and unguarded as he stood there without adopting any kind of fighting position. Shigaraki yelled, "Fuck," as the enormity of his failure struck him all at once. He was meant to spearhead the attack that would bring All Might to an end today, but in addition to failing to kill All Might, it appeared that no one on the hero's side had perished, and his Nomu and Kurogiri had been defeated by a group of inexperienced freshmen. This was unacceptable to him, particularly if his failure resulted in his capture with no reward for his efforts. Shigaraki roared in frustration during what appeared to be a mental breakdown, and as madness flashed in his eyes, he smacked both fists on the ground. Shit! Izuku and All Might pondered as they observed the floor starting to crumble into nothingness while their reaction speeds were heightened. As the ground was devoured like a tsunami coming against the coastline of an unwary coast at more than 100 miles per hour, the environment around Shigaraki rapidly began to deteriorate. Izuku sent 5 shadow clones to attack the ice-wielding team before the frozen Nomu, Azui, and the others he had brought from the USJ's makeshift sea, and the red-headed, spiky-haired teen that was coming from the same direction as the explosive blonde after he saw All Might make the initial move towards the explosive blonde who had been holding Kurogyri down. Izuku hurried off to retrieve the fallen and disabled Aizawa, who had been knocked out by Momo before it could engage in combat. The three teenagers who were still alive were hundreds of feet away from what seemed to be a meteorite landing site before they could even comprehend what had happened. Shigaraki stood panting heavily next to the no longer frozen Momo and an entirely unhurt Kurogyri inside an uncannily clean-cut sphere-shaped crater. It was obvious that the attack had worn him out almost to the brink of unconsciousness. Kurogyri opened a portal, which Momo and Shigaraki quickly entered. "It seems we have failed this time," he muttered, adding, "but make no mistake, heroes. Next time, we'll come better prepared." Kurogyri's quirk devoured his body and twisted him into an unidentified place. After setting Aizawa down and kicking over a boulder, Izuku whimpered, "Ah, man, I wanted to see their reactions to finding out I'm quirkless." Izuku began applying the mystic palm technique at its utmost level to rapidly heal Aizawa's wounds, either utterly unaware of or indifferent to the thoughts of others around him. His young chakra was so dense that Aizawa was scratch-free in a matter of seconds, and it would only take hours for his severely fractured bones to return to normal. All Might, the shirtless redhead, and the white red-haired kid who wielded ice all repeated, "Quirkless," simultaneously. Oi, is this some kind of twisted joke? Izuku started to approach the explosive blonde with an angry stare. All Might intervened between Bakugo and Izuku, stating, "Hold on, young Bakugo, I understand that this stranger should be treated with caution, but he did help us," as the blonde appeared poised to initiate another altercation. Izuku stopped mending Aizawa once he repaired the majority of the damage to the comatose man's eyes and got to his feet with a shit-eating grin, saying, "So it really is you, huh?" Izuku laughed ironically, "My dearest Kaken, live and in the flesh." Bakugo screamed venomously, You dare to spit on his memory? I'll fucking kill you." If appearances could kill. In the ninja world, Izuku most likely would have perished a few thousand times. However, the fact that Bakugo would have murdered him a dozen more times still makes the point. What? Izuku's visage broke as bewilderment overtook it. Bakugo was nearly incensed that someone was posing as him. The explosive blonde screamed and cursed, "Get the fuck off of me, All Might. I don't care what that bastard did to help us. The moment he decided to impersonate my dead best friend, he signed his fucking death warrant," as All Might forcibly held Bakugo from approaching Izuku. "Huh." The atmosphere around Izuku instantly cooled to the point where even All Might hesitated for a second. "You have a lot of nerve saying I was your best friend after the 6 years of hell you put me through, asshole." Izuku may have once referred to Bakugo as his best buddy, back when he still revered and admired him for his incredible quirk. What right does Bakugo have to call Izuku his best friend after he had abandoned him after discovering that he was quirkless, who was the leader of his harassers and a bully? In one of the saddest ways, it was funny. Bakugo hesitated for a moment, thinking that only the actual Izuku would likely comprehend the significance of those 6 years. But he couldn't stop his nature as he snarled, "Fuck you, Deku." Bakugo managed to escape All Might's hold and directly faced Izuku's less than covert murderous purpose. "I don't know who or what you are, but even if you're a ghost from my past trying to come back and haunt me, I'll take you head on as well." After regaining his murderous intent, Izuku looked at Bakugo idly for a little before clicking his tongue and said, "TCH, I guess this is about the warmest welcome back I could have expected. Anyways, where are we, again?" he inquired, eyeing Bakugo. Bakugo continued to glare at Izuku, so All Might was compelled to inquire, "Do you really not know where you are, young man?" "I can't be sure given my arrival was the first time I've traveled through one of Sasuke's extra-dimensional portals," Izuku said as he rested his chin on the pillow, "but I should be somewhere in Japan, right? I mean, you're here, and everyone's been talking in Japanese, so I can't imagine we'd be anywhere else." The cavalry that was Yue's staff appeared before All Might could reply, grabbing everyone's attention and unintentionally answering Izuku's question at the same time. Izuku replied, "Ah, we're somewhere near Yue then, I see," and he nodded in comprehension. Even though he was taken from his home globe 8 years ago, he was still able to recollect enough about his past to name a number of the teaching staff at UA who also served as the new professional heroes. Additionally, the fact that Nizu, the president of UA, was sitting on one of the pro-heroes' shoulders helped to ensure that Izuku's line of reasoning was correct. "I guess I might as well take advantage of this situation to get established here a bit faster than I initially planned," Izuku said. All Might said, "You want to do what now?" "Get a hero license, start an agency, save as many people as I can," says Izuku. "It's the whole reason I came back to this world in the first place." A little over an hour later, Izuku was alone himself in a room with Nizu, the president of UA. After All Might told the university's president what he had witnessed of the green-haired teenager during the USJ incident, Izuku found himself in this predicament. "Now then, before we get to business," Nizu said, shutting the room's door, "I don't suppose you would want a cup of tea or coffee, do you?" With an almost unnerving level of excitement, Izuku exclaimed, "Coffee? I'd love to have a cup of coffee after so long," with a hint of nostalgia. Given the endless chakra calmly moving in his body, he might not have needed the coffee, but he couldn't deny that after 8 long years without any, he had been wanting the fine flavor of a nice brew. Nizu mumbled, "Right," while pouring Izuku a cup of coffee and himself a tiny cup of tea. "Your various mentions of coming from another dimension should be a good place for us to start discussing," he said as he completed loading a tray that had his tea, Izuku's coffee, containers of milk and sugar, and started to move in Izuku's direction. "Well," Izuku said, pausing to taste his coffee and without any additions, "I suppose I could give you a brief explanation. Let's see, the other dimension, I'll just call it the ninja world for reasons that will become clear soon, is not all that different from the planet Earth in this dimension. There, the technology hasn't exactly caught up to this world level and they also lack quirks. Though, instead of unique superpowers, the world is pretty much run by superpowered ninjas that use an energy they call chakra. Anything more specific you want to know?" With an inscrutable look, Nizu questioned, "This chakra, is it the same power All Might mentioned which granted you super strength, speed, cloning, and teleportation?" "I guess you could say that, although, like I said, the power itself is just pure energy. The super strength, speed, and all my other tricks are just applications of the energy I have cultivated." A fascinating topic to discuss to be sure, but we can get into that later," Nizu laughed. "Right now, my greatest concern would be what you plan to do now that you've returned. To be specific, I'd like to know what your plan would have been if not for you descending on the USJ during a crisis like you did." "Well, assuming I just dropped somewhere else in the city, I would have first gone to a police station to dissolve my death certificate and become a registered citizen once again. Bakugo already confirmed it for me, but even if he hadn't, I would assume that after having gone unheard of for 8 years, I would have long been presumed dead, Izuku began. After that, I just looked up the requirements to become a licensed pro hero and complete them as soon as possible. If all I need to do is complete some written and practical tests to qualify, I could get licensed in as soon as a week. In the very worst case scenario, I could sustain myself by living in the wilderness for a long term if the need to complete some mandatory courses got in the way, Izuku said. You do realize that even if there was a way for heroes to get licensed with just proficiency tests, you would be tested on academic material you've missed for the past 8 years, right? Seeing Nizu's expression, which begged for explanation, Izuku added, "They're solid copies of myself that send their memories to me after being dispelled." "Oh please," he said, suppressing the urge to roll his eyes. "Anything relevant to the tests that I might not currently know, I could learn in a day with at most 50 shadow clones." "Unfortunately," Nizu murmured, "that isn't a viable option. To become a licensed pro hero, even if one fails to attend a prestigious university like my very own U.A, one would have to be apprenticed to a veteran pro for a comparable amount of time." However, he laughed at Izuku, "Maybe we can settle on a mutually beneficial deal." "I'm listening," exclaimed Izuku. "It's simple really," Nizu replied. "If it really is like you said, I'll give you a day to take the same academic test UA uses for freshman applicants. If your mark is in the 85th or a higher percentile, I'll take your performance at the USJ as a testament to your practical ability and immediately enroll you as a student in the general department with a full-ride scholarship. If you get in now, you would even have an opportunity to transfer into the hero department should you do well enough at the upcoming sports festival." Izuku said in a casual tone, "I guess that works for me," which revealed his inner laughter. He was able to see right through the mouse-dog-bear's covert plan because he had long been used to the treatment he received in the elemental nations after becoming a legend for his strength. Izuku didn't suffer any harm or malice from it. Furthermore, Izuku couldn't imagine himself performing any better if he had been Nizu. He was an exception, after all. He had already demonstrated strength and speed on par with All Might in the brief time since his appearance, and he had hinted at possessing an uncountable amount of other quirk-like skills. Although Izuku had thus far just been cordial with the heroes, it was obvious that he was not one of them. He was a wild card, intelligent, erratic, and extremely skilled. He was as dangerous as a vigilante to the heroes, who did not fully trust him. The fact that he had publicly declared his goal to become a pro-hero was the most redeeming aspect of his case. Fortunately, Izuku was at the ideal age to join the freshmen at UA, and there was no better way to shape him into a member of their group than to recruit him in the same manner they would have any other person. The youngster had nothing left to return to in their world, based on what Nizu could learn in the little hour that he had learned about Izuku's existence. With his father having abandoned him long before then, his mother deceased, and no other family members to mention, he had been absent and assumed dead for 8 years. Nizu could act as the kind president of UA and provide Izuku a house and the opportunity to accomplish his objective with a straightforward offer because he had no inheritance to claim or home to return to. In a single move, Nizu would be able to gain Izuku's favor, give his university another candidate who could be a top pro in the future, more firmly establish Izuku alongside the pro heroes, and keep someone like All Might nearby to watch over him until he could be trusted. Shikamaru would approve, Izuku grinned, shaking his head to get the idea out of his mind. Even though he wasn't trusted just now, he didn't care. After all, he wouldn't be all sunshine and roses either if another figure like Naruto suddenly surfaced. It would take a long time to gain trust, Izuku realized. As casually as Nizu had made the proposition, he accepted it. Ultimately, accepting the offer would not only have no drawbacks, but it would also relieve him of the burden of thinking about living in the wilderness and alone. Given his experience, doing so wouldn't be an issue, but after all this time, it would be much nicer to be among other people and lead a modern lifestyle. Nizu just remarked, "Splendid," before getting up and escorting Izuku to the university library. He would then watch with barely concealed awe as Izuku made a hand gesture and created dozens of clones, each of which broke off to ensure the original knew everything he needed to know for his upcoming test. Nizu, who had long ago left Izuku alone to study, was unsure whether to be amazed or alarmed when Izuku arrived at his office, declared himself prepared for the test, and almost aced it in less than 30 minutes. This was about 3 hours later. Unbeknownst to Nizu, Izuku was actually saddened to see that his world's scientific and technological advancements weren't all that unlike from those he had witnessed in the ninja world. The distance was just 50 years at most, and Izuku had actually spent nearly all of his time in the library studying history and the fundamentals of hero law. Of all the people in the ninja world, it should have come as no surprise that he could return with an academic comprehension on par with a high school graduate from his home world. After witnessing the utter madness of his role in the Fourth Great Ninja War, even the third Hokage, who had been brought back to life to fight at his best, volunteered to bestow upon him the titles of God of Shinobi and the Professor. Since he was the only one thus far to be able to duplicate bloodline limits without really having any unique heritage, it was only a matter of time. Many ninjas still don't believe Izuku when he says he has no clan history and that analysis has always been the key to his insanity. Since that's the only rational explanation for why someone could be able to apply numerous bloodline limits, others, including Naruto and Sasuke, even made the joke that he's part Otsutsuki. Naturally, such kinds of stories ought to stop now that there is a real means for those to visit his home dimension, right? Izuku grimaced at the idea of either Sasuke or Naruto being attacked and reacting in less than valiant ways. On second thought, maybe I shouldn't encourage for virtual demigods like them to visit, she said. He could already envision them killing people in self-defense without even realizing it, even after he had told them innumerable stories about the culture of his home world. He could still picture Izuku punching a hapless villain, forgetting that everyone lacked chakra. Nizu, who had graded Izuku's tests himself, began, "Now, looking up at Izuku, I must say, the fact that you managed this score with only 3 hours to prepare yourself is unexpected. Is it the test that was too easy, or your clones that were too overbearing?" Nizu inquired. Izuku began, "I wouldn't say the test was easy," after pausing to reflect. "The truth is, I was off in my estimation of how much more advanced this world is than the ninja world. Not to toot my own horn, but there's also the fact that by the time I had been transported to the ninja world, when I was 10 I was already ahead of my peers, academically speaking. For context, you should know that it's been my dream to become a hero since I could understand the concept. But even after I was diagnosed as quirkless and told by literally everyone that I could become a hero, I could never let go of my dream. As a child I thought I would never be strong enough, but I held on to the hope of being smart enough to make it as a hero. So..." Izuku stopped and racked his head trying to recall. "I think that by the time I was sent to the ninja world, 8 years ago, at the age of 10, I probably would have already heard about at least the basics of all the concepts your exam tested me on. I would have had to know at least that much to have written, what was it? 7 hero analysis notebooks." Nizu's statement, "Well, a deal's a deal," caused Izuku to experience a flashback as he stamped a document and declared, "You can officially consider yourself a student of UA."